Chapter 9. Eventually, Solomon dozed off to sleep. When he awoke, he was alone in the house. He could feel the heat of the sun radiating through the roof of the shanty, warming the room. The women had apparently left him to sleep and had gone off to work for the day. He sat up, carefully placing his injured foot onto the floor. Abishag's headdress was still wrapped around it. Suddenly, he heard a loud snort from just outside the door. His horse! Solomon grabbed his temples. "Shishak," he whispered. His men, of course, would be out looking for him. Unable to track his movements, they must have released his horse to find him. Solomon's favorite horse was a rare Arabian, so white it could almost be considered albino, if not for its fierce black eyes. The overriding characteristic of its unique pedigree was a strong loyalty to one and only one owner. Indeed, the animal had bonded with Solomon when it was a colt and had remained attached ever since. Solomon's men would have known that if released, the horse would find him, and a horse was much easier to track than a man. If his horse was here, it meant he had little time before his guards would arrive as well. What to do now? Briefly, Solomon considered getting on his mount and fleeing, but quickly dismissed the thought. His guards would still track him. Besides, it was only proper that they know he was safe and well, and soon, before the whole kingdom was called out in search of him. No, he would have to face them, but what then? Solomon struggled to his feet and hobbled over to the door. A pot of water was there. He splashed some onto his hands and face to freshen up his appearance. Underneath the woolen cloak, his clothing was still clean and stately, but he was, of course, missing a boot. There was no time to improvise one. He would have to go meet them as he was, and somehow convince them he was healthy and in no need of assistance. He limped out to the horse, which was saddled and bridled. This had surely been a deliberate consideration by his men, surmising that if the horse found Solomon, he might need to ride. They had also packed Shishak with provisions, food and water, bandages, weapons, and money. With great effort, Solomon swung up onto the mount, wincing in pain as pressure was put on his leg. He draped the woolen cloak in front of him over the horse's shoulders so that it hung down, obscuring his feet on both sides. Then, to a click of Solomon's tongue, the well-trained steed trotted out of the yard and back down the path in the direction from which it had come. Solomon had not traveled long when he spotted two riders making their way down the side of a not-too-distant ridge, silhouetted against the sky. Their plan to let the horse lead them to him had been a good one. He wheeled his mount over into a tall vineyard that bordered the path and concocted a plan. Then he trotted Shishak back down the path in order to intercept them. Abishag looked up from where she was harvesting. She was working alone today. Her mother had made a trip down to town to get some supplies to care for the stranger. The scream of a soaring eagle echoed through the canyon. That same eagle had been hovering in this area since yesterday. It was odd. Then she noticed the horsemen on the hill. Surprised, she stopped what she was doing and studied them as they worked their way down the ridge. There was no trail there, she knew. Only foxes and shepherds were seen on the upper hills, and the shepherds did not ride horses. But what were such men doing out there in midday? It was curious. Then she heard thumping on the trail. She looked toward the sound, but being deep into the vineyard, could not see the approaching rider. She heard him pass nearby, however, and the thumping faded off down the hill. Several fields down, Barkos had also noticed the riders descending the hill, but he was a bit closer to where they would meet the trail. He stopped and watched them, measuring the unknown visitors with a wary eye. Then he also heard the rider on the trail and had a good enough view to identify the unknown companion of Abishag, whom he had encountered early that morning, trotting by. All day, Barkos had been pondering this stranger who claimed to be Abishag's brother. He did not believe in the least that he was really who he said he was. The fact that Barkos had caught her with a strange man, her veil removed, only confirmed to him what he had believed all along. Like mother, like daughter, the couple's surprise and awkward reaction when he walked up on them proved it. He was a woman of ill repute, an illegitimate daughter of a Bella. Nonetheless, the man's threat that he had come to claim the land troubled Barkos. It was commonly known that neither of the women really had legal claim to the vineyard that was adjacent to his. Why the wealthy baron, Lord Haman, permitted the charade to continue, he had no idea. But one thing he did know: it would come to an end. The woman's brothers knew she was not really part of the family. It was only a matter of time until the land was repossessed, and then, perhaps, if he finessed the situation successfully, the vineyard would fall to him. But Barkos reasoned the deceitful woman certainly knew this too. They knew the only way that they could secure their estate was to somehow discover another brother. Perhaps this was what they were attempting now, and if so, it appeared there were others cooperating with their plan. Barkos, a lonely man far removed from the centers of power, was never given much notice. Bill Haman, the younger, was poised to inherit a large estate in Shunem when his father passed away, which could be at any time. When that happened, everyone knew there would likely be a shakeup in the status quo. The heir apparent was prone to the rewarding of favors, and many were working hard already to win his goodwill in order to secure a better place in the coming administration. Barkos realized that this might be an opportunity for him. If he could somehow spoil the women's devious plan and, in the process, present Baal Haman with a new vineyard, it would go a long way towards securing his own position. Barkos decided he needed to find out what exactly was going on. He dropped his basket of grapes with a thump, recklessly letting them spill to waste, and then scurried off through the vines in the direction the horseman had headed. "There!" Yakin shouted, pointing down the trail where Solomon was trotting his mount toward them. "Thank the Lord!" Boaz exclaimed. They hurriedly prodded their horses down the steep bank onto the trail to meet Solomon en route. The king had slowed his horse to a gentle trot, then a walk, as he neared the place where the men were just now clearing the row of brush that skirted the canyon wall. "All is well, my friends," he called out to them, holding up his hand in greeting as they hurried to meet him. "All is well." "My lord, king," Yakin exclaimed, "we are at your service. What do you require?" He dismounted his horse in order to be ready to attend to any need that the king might impart. Solomon stayed on his mount. "I'm a fortunate man," Solomon replied, "whom God has blessed with such wise and loyal guardians as the two of you. Please be assured that I am in need of no special attention, but I do need to speak with you." They looked him over. He did, in fact, appear to be in perfect vigor. "We were quite concerned, my lord," Boaz spoke. "We thought perhaps you had been taken or—" He left the sentence unfinished, not wanting to mention that the men had considered him to be suicidal. Solomon shook his head. No, my friends. Not so. If I have been taken by anyone, it was surely the Lord. In his heart, a man prepares his steps, but the Lord directs his way. I had intended just to go for a walk to enjoy one of the glorious sunsets that this valley is known for, but the Lord had other plans. He directed me down here, and I have been in the care of loyal Israelites who live in this valley." He motioned up the trail with a tilt of his head. "I've also learned that there is business for me to attend to here. This is what we must speak about. The Lord spoke to me in a dream last night, and my journey comes to an end in this place, at least for a time." The men looked at one another. It was a strange turn, Solomon having business in this out-of-the-way place. "My lord," Yakin asked, "should we break camp and prepare to stay?" "You will break camp at once," Solomon replied, "but you shall not remain here. What I would have you understand is I have business in this area. The two of you have business elsewhere." They looked at one another in sudden bewilderment, then back at their king. We are sworn not to leave your side, my lord," Yakin whispered, imagining the undesirable lot of a royal guard who returned without his charge. Yes, of course, Solomon replied, and you shall return to my side. But for now, your most excellent services are required elsewhere. He reached into his saddle pouch and produced 2 rolled documents, each sealed with the imperial seal. He handed one to each of the guards. Urgent business awaits in Tyre, he explained. And Boaz, you must go there in my stead and deliver this message to Huram-Abi. There is also urgent business in Jerusalem. And Yakin, you must go there in my stead and deliver this letter to the high priest Zadok. Then you will both return to me here, and I shall give you further instructions. 2 guards stared at him in stunned silence, a more surprising command almost unimaginable. Meanwhile, Barkos was quickly but carefully working his way through the vines, trying to get close enough to hear the conversation without revealing his presence. He could see the 3 men passing around what looked like some kind of legal document. He scurried in closer. But, my lord, what about our vows? And you, before whom were your vows made, the Lord or me? Before you, my lord. Well then, I release you from your vows. It is my right to do so. Please be assured that I would not require this of you if it were not of the utmost importance. But please also be assured that I am requiring it of you. The 2 guards looked at Solomon's face. They had seen this expression before, and the firmness of his tone left them in stunned silence. Yakin rubbed his neck and squinted up at the hills in bafflement. Then he looked back at the king. As always, my lord, we are at your service. But if I may, what shall we say to those who question us concerning you? You may tell them the Lord has spoken to me, and I am attending to the Lord's business in this place, Solomon answered. My lord, we will certainly be asked, so please tell us the nature of the Lord's business. Solomon pursed his lips. It was a reasonable request. He needed to give a reasonable answer. He stalled before the 2 loyal guards, in true empathy for their plight, while they patiently waited in concerned confusion. Brothers, if you must know, I have kinsmen here, kinsmen you do not know. The fact of the matter is, the ownership of these vineyards is in doubt, and I need to remain for a time to set to right that which is wrong. Israelites are oppressed, and the Lord has ordained me to liberate them. I dare not shirk this duty. Yet the messages I gave you must be delivered. I will stay and finalize the repatriation of the land. When the property is secure, I will send for you. Barkos' eyes grew wide as he listened, catching some of the dialogue, but not all. So it was a plot to steal the land, and well organized, too. The man and the 2 riders appeared to be finely dressed and well financed. This was a situation to be taken seriously. He leaned forward. At that moment, a dry twig snapped loudly under his foot. The 3 men turned quickly, the guards reaching for their swords. Barkos sank down low into the vines and remained very still. The trio searched the vines with their eyes, but perceiving nothing, after a few moments, they relaxed. It is just a fox. They are a plague around here, Solomon said. This is a peaceful little place. You need not worry about me. Come, let us ride on as we converse. I'm actually traveling to town. The guards remounted, and the 3 men moved down the path a bit. When they had disappeared over the hill, Barkos scurried out of his hideout and rushed back to his own vineyard, his heart thumping wildly. His mind was racing. He would have to inform Baal Haman. Solomon and his 2 men continued to converse as they rode side by side. My lord, are you in need of any provisions before we part ways? Should we not return to camp and leave you well prepared? Yakin asked. Truly, I thrive under the blessing of your care, Solomon replied, but, as I said, I have kinsmen here. They can supply me. I have plenty of gold, as you know, and the business I have to attend to is urgent, as is yours. The throbbing in Solomon's ankle reminded him that he did, in fact, have urgent business. the care of his foot. The bone would need to be set soon, he knew, and he did not want to spend too much time with the men lest they discover his injury. If they were to learn of it, they would certainly prefer death than to leave his side. As they came to the place where the guards would leave the trail and head back up the hill toward camp, Solomon turned his horse around and faced them. They looked back at him with loyal attention. "My friends," he said, "here we part ways for a time. If you carry out the mission I have given you with the same honor and diligence as you have displayed while by my side, I will be most grateful. Do not find yourselves faltering or fearful, and if you encounter hardship, remember that I am depending on you. The messages you carry are important, and the seal on those letters is to be broken only by those to whom they are addressed. When we meet again, you will be rewarded for this unusual service. May the Lord be with you." The two guards, with great reluctance and uttering desperate urges for the king to be wary, bade farewell to their master. Vowing to return, they turned to embark on the most terrifying mission their loyal hearts could imagine, leaving their charge. The unlikely parting successfully accomplished, Solomon continued down the path towards Shunem. For the first time he could remember, he was truly alone, unknown, and in a strange place. Alone did not fully account for the sensation that crept over him. He was now fully responsible for his own protection, a situation which he could scarcely remember facing in his life. The defense of a king was an art which Jachin and Boaz had brought to new levels of perfection. Boaz, the appointed commander in the event of an attack on the king, was an expert in the throwing arts, where Jachin specialized in attack with the sword. Boaz, ambidextrous and loaded with knives and throwing axes, had so honed his skills that he could have several projectiles in the air simultaneously, pulling and swinging with both right and left hand in rapid succession. If the assailants were dressed in armor, the axes were thrown. Even if the weapons didn't pierce the armor, they would most certainly down the attacker so that Jachin could finish him off with the sword. In the event of a quick attack, Boaz's knives would be in the attacker's chest almost before he knew they were coming, having turned perfect revolutions in the air to land blade into flesh. His art required tremendous concentration and nerves as steely as his blades, for the throws and revolutions were practiced at exact distances. A knife thrown too soon would hit harmlessly, blunt end on the target. To be effective, it was imperative that Boaz remain in a fixed position, which served well his job of keeping the king behind him while he assessed the attack and called out orders to Jachin. Jachin's skill and brute strength with a sword gave him the ability to charge and subdue or detain attackers long enough for Boaz's well-placed projectiles to find their targets. In practice sessions, Jachin was accustomed to hearing dummy knives whiz past his ears as Boaz barked out orders. Left, right, down! Were real knives in the air, he would have to lurch instantly or die. For longer throws, Boaz was also counted among the mighty men of David who practiced with sling and stone, the champion of those who could target a stone to a hair's breadth and not miss. Solomon also carried knives and could rearm Boaz, or even throw knives in his own defense if the situation became sufficiently desperate. He did not, however, throw as well as Boaz. If this method of defense were executed to perfection, it was unlikely that any but the most overwhelming attack could reach the king, for attacking ranks would already be thinned by guards farther out along the fringe. So well trained was the king's entourage that war games showed that to have any hope of victory, an attacking enemy must outnumber the defense by a minimum of 3-1. This bit of information was a fine deterrent. Fighting men, not being fools, would not be anxious to try their odds at being the one out of the three who survived. The reputation of the defense was deliberately published widely, while its secrets were withheld, a strategy designed to make the recruiting of would-be assassins difficult. No attacker would survive to explain their defeat, and any new attacker would have no intelligence upon which to devise an improved assault. Among future generations, the defense would be known as Solomon's Shield, for it was Solomon who had designed it, and in military games, it had proven stunningly effective. Now, for the first time Solomon could remember, he was without this protection. It felt surreal to be so far from Jerusalem, far from his constant responsibilities, far, even, from anyone who would recognize him, to be alone, all alone, not knowing what would happen next, or even truly why he was here. All of Solomon's life had been carefully scripted for him until this moment. If there was a God in heaven who ordered the steps of man, there was plenty of room for him to do it now.